Hi, this is Bobby G, and this is Bobby G's Big Stone ATX with my co-host Pi. And we were both so excited about our guest today, Meghan Williams. Meghan taught me TM and works with all kinds of people in town. And she's going to tell us about the love that she pours into what she does and how that enriches the fabric of Austin. And she's going to tell us about some of the big stones in her life. Big stones, little stones, they all add up. But Meghan, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks both of you for having me.
Perfect. Tell us about how long have you been in Austin for now?
Let's see. So I actually went to college out here back in the day, and then went to Chicago and back to Dallas for a stint, and have been here most recently since 2020.
Okay.
Right before everything shut down for COVID.
There you go.
Yeah.
And how long? And you've been involved in TM now, Transcendental Meditation, for 10 years now?
So I myself have been meditating for almost 20, and I've been teaching for 10.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us about Austin. Tell us about teaching here in town, and the different people you work. Well, you probably can't give up names of people you work with, but how it affects people's lives.
Well, it's such an interesting question. I used to run a center in Dallas with my ex-husband, and then most recently, when I moved to Austin, I did a rotation at a veterans facility working with veterans with severe PTSD, drug addiction, sex addiction, alcohol addiction, and then I just moved to teaching the general public from my home in Austin. And all three of these have been very different experiences. For instance, in Dallas, teaching in Dallas, everyone's a lot more stressed out in Dallas than they are in Austin. And so we were busy all the time, and it was actually the women that were leading the charge with consciousness in Dallas. We taught probably 60-70% women in Dallas. And in Austin, it's the men leading the charge. I teach mostly males in Austin.
Is that right?
Which is it's always so fascinating to see who's upholding the consciousness in the collective when you go to all these different cities. And, for me, just this experience of being able to, and it's so interesting because I know I see it, and then I have a little Pi at my house too, and so my mom's always there watching Tia, my dog, and she'll reflect the same thing back to me. And these people will come in and they just look so stressed. Their face, you can tell it's just like life is wearing them down. And by the time they've gotten to me and they're coming to learn how to meditate, they've usually tried everything else. They're like, all right, we're going to give this meditation thing a chance. And then they have that first experience of transcending and experiencing something inside of them that they didn't even know was there, that makes such a difference in their reality, that's so expansive, so blissful, so beautiful. And then they come out and it's like 10 years have been lifted off their face. They look like a completely different person. And being able just to watch that transformation, even just in the first 90-minute session that we have, is just a magical thing, and then taking them through the 4 days of the course and hearing how it's already starting to impact their lives and, create an experience where they're feeling more levity, more space, more tolerance, more connection, more capacity. I feel so blessed and grateful to be one of the people that gets to facilitate this for others.
Yeah. It's like I think you and I were talking about that, the saying about being the hole in the flute that God blows
Yes,
through.
Yes. That was such a great analogy. And that's, I think one of the most beautiful things about this experience, at least for me anyways, is constantly just having that ability to be in awe of what now flows through me, right? Being able to actually get myself out of the way to be a vessel for this knowledge and, create this experience for others is, it's a very humbling experience. And it creates a lot of gratitude, which is lovely.
Yeah. It's an amazing connection that you feel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, a connection with myself, my experience of self, my experience of something greater than me, a connection that I feel with others, connecting from that same place and being able to have that experience where regardless of where everyone's coming from and the challenges they're facing or the way they are or are not capable of showing up for themselves or others, on the baseline level, we're still connected from an energetic experience that is, expansive and beautiful and supportive and full of potential.
Yeah, I like that. Full of potential.
Full of potential, yeah.
I find, so I've been, I had heard about transcendental meditation, over the years.
Beatles put us on the map.
Yeah. I just, I think it, I was working on some things myself, and then David Lynch had passed away, which I guess drove a lot of people your way.
Yeah.
And I still don't get some of his movies, but
yeah,
I liked what he had to say.
Yeah.
And it got me curious, and then reached out to you and took the 4-day class, and it was just I feel like answers just come to me more quickly, or more easily.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things where, being human is a very challenging experience. There's so many things that are constantly bombarding your nervous system, be it screens, be it traffic, be it, children, significant others, deadlines, bosses. We're constantly having to contract in order to be able to show up. And all of that contraction holds charge to it. Your nervous system eventually gets to a point where it gets full. And, when you don't have space, it's really hard to allow for all of that creative intelligence to bubble up inside of you. And when you get a technique that allows you to facilitate that kind of genuine space in your nervous system, in your psyche, optimize your mind-body connection, there's so much that actually comes through you versus just coming from you.
Yeah, I like that. It's a very, it's nice to have that break a couple times a day.
Yeah.
Where you can just
settle in.
Breathe.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. And the average person, they're always trying to look for things to keep them out of their mind, out of their body. I have so many friends. Okay, we got to play music, we got to have podcasts on, we got to do all the things to keep us distracted from ourselves. Because when you get so full like that and your nervous system gets so dysregulated and, being able to just sit and settle into yourself isn't an option. You settle in and then it just gets comfortable. You want to project out. And it becomes challenging because, this whole idea of external regulation. I mean, it's the thing that plagues our society, and it's a part of our human tendency. It's wired into our DNA. When we grow up as children, we depend on these two individuals to feed us, clothe us, love us, nourish us, and hopefully we were lucky enough to have two parents that could do that for us. But then as we grow into adulthood, there's nothing that teaches us in our education system to be internally regulated. And so people consistently grow up still seeking that external regulation in all these different things, be it other individuals, be it their job, be it addictions, something that they reach out to pull in order to facilitate that experience of wholeness, of fullness, of whatever they're looking for, satiated, right? And so all of this out here is undependable. Think about really depending on someone else to provide you with your self-worth when most people out there can't even establish a relationship with themselves, much less a relationship with someone else. It gets to be a really dicey game, and it's very anxiety provoking. Learning how to internally regulate and depend on yourself to fill your cup and provide you with the things you need to feel full and satiated. And then being able to settle into a place and just know that it's already there. Have that experience of, wow, I didn't even know I was full until I did. I didn't even know I was calm until I did. I didn't even know this place existed. And then being able to rewire the neural pathways to be able to create the mind-body connection, to hold that space even outside of meditation. Then you actually get to move through life with self-empowerment and autonomy. And you're not constantly depending on something else out here to regulate your experience of self.
You go from a thermometer to a thermostat.
Yeah. Great way to put it.
Tell me about, I think it's so interesting, and you've told me about this before, but we've not had this conversation. Working with the veterans must have been really, really special.
Wow. Yeah, it was.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and so...
because, that's such an important part of our community.
Oh, my.
And to be giving them something to find some peace.
Yeah.
It must be really rewarding.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Sorry, go right ahead though.
Yeah, it was by far and away one of my most rewarding experiences that I've had as a teacher. The things that some of these individuals go through, you can't even imagine how that has the potential to break the human psyche, and lose hope and settle into despair. I don't know that the human condition is actually wired for having to go through that kind of trauma, And so these people, this particular place that I taught, it was all men. It was a strictly male facility, and it was veterans that suffered from all sorts of addictions. The government actually pays for veterans to learn this technique, and that's because it's been so effective to, alleviate and manage PTSD. Mm-hmm. And so I would go in, and it's a rehabilitation center, and their usual version of meditation is yoga, right? That's what they consider meditation. And so when they came and brought us in as an organization to help facilitate these experiences, they didn't really have a meditation room, and so we wound up going into the theater room. Because that's where they had the comfortable chairs, and it was this, had blacked out windows, and so it's sort of like you're going into a cave with these people, and which is very metaphorically apropos because it is a transformative experience. And these guys would come in, and even just watching some of them walk in, the inertia that's just pulling them down, the heaviness that they're walking in with. You can tell that when's the last time they smiled, right? When's the last time they laughed? When's the last time they felt safe? And then being able to walk them through this experience, and, most everyone, especially in that space, having that contrast. You talk about contrast, the average person that comes in to learn that hasn't been through all of this trauma, they're still having an element of contrast when they have that first experience of consciousness. But someone like this who's been holding trauma in their nervous systems for decades and then having that experience, you know, when they come out, it's like their face was glowing, you know, you'd see them smile. They'd even start laughing, just giggling, giddy sometimes, because they can't believe that there's something like that inside them after everything they've been through. You know, they're so used to just going in and feeling, you know, discomfort and despair and disdain and all the things, and then having these experiences where all of a sudden they're going in and feeling levity and beauty and bliss and, you know, grace. It's like, it was the most amazing thing to witness, just the face when they finished. They looked so serene and so peaceful. And then, you know, I had a couple of them that stayed in touch with me on Facebook and social media and all the things. And, you know, one of these gentlemen in particular, not only had he gone through all the things that one goes through when they go to protect our country, but his wife had also died in his arms, you know, car accident and tragic death. And I mean, this guy, sweetest guy in the world, and was in such a place of just not knowing if he was ever going to love again, laugh again, live again. You know, a lot of these guys have had experiences with, you know, maybe getting to that brink of, do I want to live? Do I not want to live? You know, and after he learned, he had such a transformative, life-changing experience, and he went off and he started dating, he got married, and, you know, just went and got a job, you know, completely different person now. And he credits this technique largely with that transformation.
What an amazing feeling that must be.
Oh, well, I take zero credit for it. You know, like I said, that's something.
You were the hole in the flute.
Yes, I take credit for holding the space for all of that to move through me. But yeah, no, it's beautiful it's beautiful to witness the resiliency of the human spirit like that. You know, given the opportunity, we all can heal ourselves. And that's such an empowering thing when people realize that.
Wow. That's it. It just it hammers home the for me that it's like the human body is just so amazing.
Oh my.
You know, you can get a cut and you heal.
Yeah.
You can go through trauma and because of TM or, you know, other things that you can do for yourself, eating right, getting sleep, fasting, what have you, you can get back on track.
Yeah. Yeah, we're self-regulating organisms. Given the opportunity, that's what we do. It's what our system is wired to do.
I'm sure Big Pharma doesn't want to hear that.
No, I'm sure they don't, but they need to.
Yeah, or people in general need to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, that's again, this external regulation, right? A lot of people, you know, when you have to take pills and substances to keep you in a space of functionality, that is a very disempowering experience.
And that's just, well, I mean, I guess I can't speak for everyone, but I would imagine that by and large, a lot of that is just treading water.
Yeah. You know, and
life's supposed to be more than treading water.
Way more.
Right? You're supposed
way
to be
more.
riding the wave and having a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you know, and you know, I'll be the first to say there are situations where taking something to help regulate your experience is necessary. But then being able to titrate down from it, or being able to not take as much of it as you used to, all of this just brings empowerment back into your reality. You know, as humans, we tend to just kind of naturally fall back into an anxious space when we perceive a lack of control. It's hard for us to trust a lot of times. It doesn't necessarily come innately to all people. You know, that's something that hopefully you're blessed with the capacity to have had a journey that facilitates that for you, and being able to lean back into that trust, that grace, that faith, however that shows up for you. Not everybody has that opportunity. And so being able to at least have these little things in their reality, a technique that enables them to get this level of autonomy back and a level of self-actualization and self-referral, all of that creates an experience of humanity that's a lot more manageable to deal with.
Yeah, that's nicely said.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking it's such a beautiful arrow to have in your quiver to, be able to take a break from whatever may be going on and to just to breathe and feel connected and know everything's going to be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did it show up for you? Like, what were some of the things that you noticed after meditating? You've been at it for how long now?
A couple months now, I guess.
That's been longer than that. I think it's been longer than that. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be 3 months. Like I was saying earlier, I find that answers come to me more quickly.
Yeah.
Or maybe they don't come more quickly. Maybe I just feel more confident and I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't need to by and large, I don't need to mull things over or overthink things too much.
Yeah.
It's, I've said for a long time, kind of like my daily thing, looking to stretch and strengthen my mind and my body, through stretching and various things in my life. And this has been a really great thing to add into all the other things that I do. Mm-hmm. And it is like a little vacation. Mm-hmm. It is like in the morning doing it first thing. When I'm done with my meditation, it's like I don't feel the need to run and get a cup of coffee.
Right.
I feel really like I'm really tuned in.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Really feel good, and then okay, now where am I going to go with my day?
Yeah.
And it's I found it really, really nice in the afternoon to, again, recharge.
Yeah.
And, you came over here earlier and we had a group meditation.
Yes, we meditated together.
Before this, which I you brought up the idea of doing it together afterwards. And I was like, no, let's do it before. Yeah. Let's connect.
Prime the spot, set the stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's been really great for me, and I think it's also been a really it's allowed me to have conversations with people that I wouldn't have had before.
Yeah. Because
I hear so many people who are stressed out.
Yeah. It's the human condition.
Really, it's like it's an easy sail to point people in your direction, because they are curious and they do want to know about, what's something I can do that's, simple
and
healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really been interesting. When you were talking about earlier, people who are lucky enough to have people that modeled things and taught them how to handle life. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing there were probably some great people in your life.
Oh yeah.
Teachers, coaches, family members, and whatnot. Why don't you tell us about those big stones or those small stones, or the people that came in and showed you that love and encouragement, and because they've caused some ripples.
Oh my. I feel so blessed to have so many amazing people in my world that have guided me on my journey. I think first and foremost would obviously be my mom, who you met, and you know how magical she is. So she's like my solid foundation. You know, she's always been my rock, my biggest fan, always in my corner. I don't know how I would have done life ever without her. And she was the one that always held space for magic in my world, which was so important to me. You know, I tend to be a very idealistic, romantic, you know, I love being able to hold space for magic and beauty and, you know, synchronicity and all that stuff that makes you feel like there's something more to it than what meets the eye. And she always has been and is still, you know, the person that holds that foundational truth for me, that continues to hold that space, that, you know, there is more than meets the eye, and there is a deep magic in the world that, you know, if you can find a way to tap into it, it supports you in so many different ways. And she's been a tremendous inspiration for me and a tremendous support. So I feel very blessed to have her. And then I have, you know, a great handful of girlfriends and all of these people, you know, some good guy friends that really, I would say, provide the liquid that's actually necessary, the water necessary to make the ripples in. Without these people, I wouldn't be full, you know, in the same way that I am. And when I think about, you know, the people outside and all my friends, my mom, all these people I view as my family. When I think of people outside of my family that have made these really significant ripples in my world, I think that one of the greatest gifts that we can give to each other is the ability to see each other, see someone else for who they truly are, not who you want them to be. Validate their reality, validate their existence. Let them show up authentically as themselves and hold space for however that looks. And I think it's so rare to find people that can do that, you know, because so many people, you know, we tend to kind of, and I think it's a human tendency, you know, we tend to kind of live in a projection of what we think we want people to see, what we think we need people to see in order to be validated, accepted, you know. And then when people come into our lives, you know, we have needs, wants, desires, expectations, and there's a tendency to want to, you know, kind of shrink them into a box to make them be this person that we want them to be, you know, to fill the needs that we have. And all of this just, it can take away from all the beauty that is when you're trying to make it what you want it to be. And so one of my most pivotal experiences was actually when I learned TM and my TM teacher. She's one of the most influential people in my world.
What's her name?
June Humphreys.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when I went to learn TM, I was in my 20s. Lots of anxiety, lots of panic attacks. I was definitely, you know, in addictive strategies, trying to create an experience of just feeling calm and feeling functional, which was actually not working, making less calm and less functionality. And so when I found her and I went to go see her.
How'd you find her? What was the...
Well, this is actually a really interesting story. So both my parents learned TM back in the 70s at a YPO conference in Japan.
Okay.
And my mom at one point had recommended that I looked into it for my anxiety. And so I did, and you know, at this point I'm in my early 20s, and it cost a lot more than what it does now. And so I didn't.
Really?
Oh my. I paid, yes. I don't want to say that out loud. Yeah, it was a lot more than it was now. And there was 1 year out of, like, you know, the 50 years, 60 years that we've been around, that it was $2,500 to learn. And that just happened to be the year that I learned. I had to take out a student loan and do all the things to make it work. and it paid itself forward in so many ways. But at that point, I couldn't afford it, so I'd gone and asked my dad if he would help me, because he was in a place where he had the financial means to do so, and he said, no, I can't help you. But I think that if you do find a way to pay for it, you should go and talk with June Humphreys, because she had checked his meditation and he thought that we would be a good fit. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to figure it out. And so I went to a intro lecture in Dallas, and I didn't feel a very strong connection with that teacher. And so then I just kind of shelved it. I had asked her, I said, well, I'm looking for June Humphreys. Do you know where I can find her? She said, no, I don't know. I don't know where they are. I'm not sure where they went. They were here, but I think there's somewhere else now. I said, okay. And so I thought, well, I'll get around to it eventually. Maybe it'll get cheaper at some point. I'll be able to afford it. And so I was at work, and I was working at a very big corporation at the time, which was a very stressful job. And I was having a very bad day. And so just in a moment of just panic and necessity, I started Googling TM teachers, transcendental meditation, June Humphreys, blah, blah. I couldn't find her, but I did find something that popped up in the Woodlands that was a peace palace where you could go and learn TM. And I was like, oh, yes, that's what I need. I need to go to a peace palace. I need to get out of corporate, go to a peace palace, learn how to do this. And so I called the peace palace, and this guy, David Humphreys, answered the phone. And I said, oh, well, I'm looking to learn TM, and I want to get some more information. And he said, oh, well, let me put you in touch with June Humphreys. She's the one that teaches the ladies. And I said, I have been looking for her for like the last year. Yes, please put me in touch with her. And so it just, the universe supported it. And I talked to her, and I went out to go learn, and I was with her for the 4-day course. And, at that point in time, being in corporate America, and, it was never my thing. I never felt like talk about not being seen, not being validated, and not being able to have an authentic experience of myself. That was a real challenging time for me. And I always I felt kind of invisible, and I wasn't. I was very much, at a very important job, and I was doing lots of things, but I never felt authentically seen. I was always projecting, and I felt like I had to. Because I felt like I was too sensitive, or this, that, and the other. And so when I went to go meet June, she was like the first person that saw me and normalized my experience of myself. She was able to relate to me in ways that I didn't think anybody could relate to. I felt like so alone on this island, like I was the only one having these challenges and these feelings and these experiences. And then she was able to validate that for me as, something she had gone through too. And, talk to me about nervous systems. When you have a delicate nervous system, this is how life shows up for you. And, she made me feel normal. And I never felt that way. And so that was such a life-changing experience for me to just be seen. And so she and I became very close, and, she was like a second mom to me, and she would let me come out to the Peace Palace once a quarter and just hang out and unstress and meditate and just, be with her. And there was such a magic in that. I looked up to her so much. I just wanted to be her. And I just remember, this one time I had taken my mom there to get my mom's meditation checked, and June said something about, we're trying to create a room here so that we can host teacher training. And I was like, teacher training? Real? Like, you train teachers? I could do this? She was like, Meghan, I've been talking to you about this for the last year. You just haven't heard me. And in my mind, I was like, she was so magical, and this whole thing was so magical. In my head, I was like, oh, well, you probably just have to fall out of a star to be a TM teacher. Like the average person can't do this. And then she told me, absolutely you can. And I looked at my mom and I was like, I have to do this. My mom was like, absolutely not.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so she was my inspiration. She is very largely responsible for me being here talking to you about this today.
Absolutely.
I don't know what I would have done without her.
Well, what happened? So she suggested this.
She suggested
Your
it.
mom?
My mom kiboshed it. Because,
And-
I mean, it's not the easiest thing to do. I had to go study with monks for 6 months to learn how to teach this technique.
So tell us about that. Can you?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yes, please. So your mom tries to shoot this down.
My mom shot it
But
down.
you won't listen to that. You
I listened to it at first, because I don't think I was in a place where I was ready to make that kind of a change yet. Because I had to quit my job. I had to leave my family. I had to, really make a lot of changes in my world to be able to do this. And
Sure.
that's scary in your 20s, you know?
It's a big commitment.
Big commitment. And so, I learned when I was 27, and it took me until I was 35 to get to teacher training. It took me that long. I had to wait until my desire outweighed my fear.
Okay.
And I knew I wanted to do it.
Are you married at this point, or are you single?
At this point, I am living with someone, and we're planning on getting married.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was this who you got married to?
No.
That was someone else. Okay.
No, that was someone else.
So you decide to, at 35, you're like...
Well, I met another pivotal person, another stone along the way.
Okay.
So June, my TM teacher, when I went to go see her, I was not in a healthy space. I was
When you met June.
When I met June, when I first started TM, I was very anxious. I was very, very much in the throes of, drinking too much and not taking care of my body. And I was overworked. I wasn't sleeping well. And so I had a lot of things going on in my psycho-emotional, physical body that were making life very challenging for me. And so she recommended that I go to this Ayurveda doctor to try to help, deal with some of the physical stuff that I was having challenges with.
Tell us about an Ayurveda doctor. I don't know if I'm familiar. I'm familiar with the word, but...
So Ayurveda is another one of the pillars of this knowledge. All this, the transcendental meditation, it all falls under something called Vedic knowledge. And there's transcendental meditation, there's Ayurveda, there's Jyotish, there's Stapacheveda. So Ayurveda is a system of health and wellness that actually is the oldest system of health and wellness on record. It actually predates Chinese medicine. And the way that this works is it's based on it's a doshic system. And so they basically say that in any physical constitution, each individual physical constitution is compromised of dosha influences. And the doshas are based on the elements earth, wind, and fire. And so, Pitta is fire, Vata is wind, Kapha is earth. And when you go to an Ayurveda Vaidya, they're able to feel your pulse, and they do a pulse diagnosis, and they're able to determine what your dominant and subdominant doshas are and where the imbalance lies in your physiology. And so when all of these doshas are in balance, that's what creates harmony in the mind-body connection. And that's what makes you feel good in your skin. You feel like you're healthy, you're vibrant, you're active, you're mentally capable of showing up for all the things you need to show up for. When all these doshas get out of balance, that's what creates a lot of the issues. So Vata, for instance, is wind. So Vata out of balance is going to be the very anxious nervous system that can't sit still. People that are always like tapping their leg and got to chew gum all the time. And, they can't settle into their own body because they've got all this motion going on, too much activity, too much wind, too much vata. And vata is also going to be, the precursor for the nervous system disorders like fibromyalgia and, a lot of the different ailments that we deal with when we don't have capacity to just hold that inner equanimity, to settle into our body. And vatas tend to be, very thin. They tend to be very anxious. They tend to be very driven by their external reality because they don't have this ability to just anchor into themselves. And then pitta, pitta is fire. So the world here would not exist without pittas. Pittas are the doers. They're the ones that get stuff done. Vatas are the magical creative ones. Pittas are the ones that get stuff done. And so pitta out of balance is overdrive. That's when you've got workaholics. That's when you've got the people that can't stop doing. They've got to be constantly producing. And pitta is inflammation, it's heat. And so when pitta is out of balance, that's what creates all of the inflammatory responses in our body. A lot of the Crohn's disease or colitis or, any of the gout, stuff like that. When we get over-inflammatory response in our immune system and our nervous system, that's a pitta imbalance. It also creates anger. Pittas are very when they're out of balance, they're very direct. Their speech is very harsh and, they kind of paint you into a corner and tell you how it's going to be. And then, kaphas are the ones that, you just get around them and you're like, because they're so grounded, they're in their body. They're very centered in themselves. Kapha is that earth, it's that grounding force. But then you get too much and it's inertia. You can't get up off the couch. You can't go be active. And so then you have to worry about things like obesity and arterial sclerosis and all the things that come from a lack of activity. And so going to an Ayurveda Vaidya, they diagnose your pulse and then they use herbs and diet and, meditation. TM is the foundational thing to balance your doshas. And all of these things to help get you back in balance. And so she put me in contact with an Ayurveda Vaidya that I went to go see to deal with some of the issues that I was having. And his name is Jim Davis, and he and I hit it off instantaneously. And, we became really good friends. I would go see him, every time he lived in Iowa at the time. I'd go see him every time he came to Dallas. And he became like a father figure to me. And my experience growing up as a child, my father and I had a very strained relationship. It was a very challenging relationship, very disruptive, not healthy. And I suffered from that in a lot of ways as I moved into adulthood. And he picked up on that, and he would kind of, talk me through it and create this safe space where it felt, like he was a father figure in some ways. And he's by far, I would not be here without him in my life, without his influence that he's had in my life. And when I'm guessing I was around 30, 29. I was probably 28, 29. And I had something that happened with my car and it was going to be real expensive to fix. And so I'd asked my dad if he would mind helping me out a little bit. And he said no. And, had a disagreement about it. And the next weekend was Father's Day. And I said, okay, well, I understand. I'll figure it out. I'm going to call you on Father's Day. I'll talk to you on Father's Day. And my parents divorced when I was 15 months old. And so, we were never in the same city, same space, same state. So I'll call you on Father's Day. And he said, no, it's okay. You don't need to worry about it. And I was like, well, no, I just want to, He's like, no, it's okay. You don't need to. And so, sure enough, Father's Day rolls around and I tried to call him and he didn't answer the phone, didn't return my text messages or anything like that. And so then I had been texting with Jim because I was trying to set up an appointment with him. And I was like, you really seem like you'd be a great father, and I really just need to say this to someone, so happy Father's Day. And he called me immediately, and he was like, let's do it. I'm going to be your dad. I was like, really? He was like, yeah. And at that point, he cosmically adopted me and never missed a Father's Day. Every year since then, he's been with me on Father's Day. I never even spent a Father's Day with my real father. And so, you know, I remember when we first started, you know, having this father-daughter bond, going through these tumultuous relationship experiences, and he'd stay on the phone and talk to me for hours and help me unwind all this stuff, you know, and just having that male support in my life, that pillar of strength, you know, that I just never had, that was an amazing experience. You know, it healed so many broken parts that I had. And he also is a TM teacher. And so he sponsored me when I went to teacher training. And so to circle back to the story and your question, he was one of the ones that kept encouraging me to go. You know, you really need to do this. This would be good for you. I'll help you. I'll sponsor you. You know, I'll help you get through it. And so I kept percolating and percolating. I had it in I know I want to do this. I know I want to do this. And then one night I went to bed and I had this dream, and I still remember it like vividly. And I woke up the next morning and I just knew, okay, now it's time. And so I told my mom, I told my boyfriend, and I actually, funnily enough, had just gotten a new role at this company that I worked for. I was in a management role, and I was up for a big promotion. And my boss and I really got along well, and I told her what I was doing. She actually wound up being a meditator too. She practiced TM also. She was like, well, you know, I think it's great that you're doing it, but really? Like, you want to leave all this and go be a meditation teacher? Like, you're up for a big promotion, a big raise? And I was like, yeah, I do. I know this is what I'm supposed to do. And I was ready. So I did. Wow. And it was the biggest risk I've ever taken, jumping into the void empty-handed. I had no job. I, you know, spent a lot of my money to pay for the course. I left my relationship. My mom didn't want me to go. Her friends thought I was joining a cult. Like, it was a mess, you know, but I just knew. I knew this is where I was going to bring value to the world. I knew it's what I was supposed to do. And I did, and I went and I studied with female monks for 6 months in Iowa. I know it's such a womp. Everybody, they do it in Thailand now and all these magical places, but Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the gentleman that brought this technique out to the States, he had a genuine vision, desire that he wanted to facilitate a consciousness-based education system where from a young child, people are given knowledge of the knower. You know your potential. You know how to internally regulate. You know how to move from self. And so he created a university out there in Iowa. They bought a university and created a Maharishi school, and then they built a TM community around it. And so that's where they were hosting their teacher trainings at that point. And so I went to Iowa, and for 6 months I was learning how to vessel this knowledge and how to, Maharishi was real adamant that he wanted his teachers to have visceral experiences of higher states of consciousness so they could talk about that with conviction to their students and really hold the possibility of it. And it was an amazing experience and the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. You're unraveling layers and layers of self, and it's placing you in a space where you're running into all the parts of you that you refused to deal with before. And it's I was a completely different person when I came out of it.
What's an example?
I felt confident. I felt,
So funny. That's exactly the word I was going to say, but I was like, I can't put words in her mouth. I need to sit.
yeah, I did. I felt confident. And the thing that's wild is I felt seen, and not by anyone else. I was able to see myself. I developed a relationship with myself that I never had. You know, I mean, in one of my most, what would I call it? You know, rock bottom moments or whatever, I can remember, you know, being in this space where I was drinking too much and doing all the things to try to numb all of the discomfort and stuff that I was feeling. And I remembered reading this quote. I was like scrolling Facebook or something, and there was this quote from Anthony Hopkins. And I mean, I don't know if it was actually an original quote, but it was on his feed. And it said something like, you know, the stages of alcoholism. And it was very poignant and very direct and very just cut and dry. And it was like, you know, the 3 stages. And the first one was the man takes a drink. Second one was the drink takes a drink. Third one is the drink takes the man. And I remember reading that, and it just sent chills up and down my spine. And I was like, I know I'm at number 2. I'm almost at number 3. Oh my gosh. You know, and I just freaked out. And I remember having this, like looking around me for someone that I can have this conversation with. And when I reflect back on that moment now, I couldn't even have that conversation with myself. I didn't exist enough in my own internal reality to hold that space for myself. And going into that teacher training and being forced to sit with myself in all the ways that I had to, and then enliven all of this amazing stuff inside me that I didn't even know was there, it facilitated this relationship with me, for me, that changed my life forever. You know, I was healthy, I was whole, I had an offering that I believed in, that I was so passionate about, that I could give to the world. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's what a magical story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
God, thank you for teaching me TM, for being in my life and being with me at Pi.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Oh my God, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That was
Thank
a
you for
beautiful
having
story.
me. Oh, well, thank you. It's, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity to tell it. You know, I really...
Yeah, there's just some really beautiful people in your life, and you know, talk about the ripples, and I mean, just I think just that one veteran story is like, that's changed one person's life.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is, and again, I don't take any credit for it. You know, that's them changing their own life. I'm just giving them the path that shows them how.
Yeah, just showing it.
Yeah, but it's an amazing experience. And you know, when I was teaching in Dallas, and you know, my ex-husband would be the other major stone in my world that was such an amazing person, and you know, I credit him with so many things. But when we were teaching together, you know, I just remember this one time, you know, just kind of having that out of body experience where you're sitting there watching yourself and just seeing how far I had come from where I was before, how much happier I was, you know, how much more fulfilled, and, you know, just present, how present I was in my own reality, you know. It's just, those are the moments that make it all worth it, you know. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for
Oh my
having
gosh.
me. Thanks, Pi.
We're all out.